Good day and welcome to our next lesson, lesson 16 in the book of Mark. And today we're going to finish chapter 5. Now if you've been following along, you'd know that Jesus has done a number of miracles both on the Jewish side of the Lake of Galilee and on the Gentile side. And after he did the miracle of cleansing the man who was possessed from demons, he left and came back to the Jewish side of the lake. It says, when Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, this is to the Jewish side, a great multitude gathered to him. So here again, Jesus was surrounded by many, many people. And he was by the sea. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name, and when he saw him, he fell at his feet and begged him earnestly, saying, My little daughter lies at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, that she may be healed, and she will live. So Jesus went with him, and a great multitude followed him and thronged him. So you've got to picture this. This is a man, a ruler, one of the high men in the court of the Jewish synagogue. Most of the Pharisees and the people were against Jesus. This man may have seen what Jesus had done in the synagogue previously, and he came because his daughter was at the point of death. Now, there's nothing more pitiful than a child who is dying and no one knows what to do for her or him. So this man came and he fell down, not to worship Jesus, but in a begging sensation, to beg Jesus to come and heal his daughter. He thought that if Jesus came and touched her, that she would be better. So Jesus went with him, but he was thronged by many, many people. A great multitude went with him. And then it goes on. Now a certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years and had suffered many things from many physicians. She had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, If only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well. And immediately the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the affliction. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that power had gone out of him, turned around in the crowd and said, Who touched my clothes? You've got to put the picture here. Here's Jesus with a huge throng of people around him. And this poor lady, who had been afflicted with this malady for 12 years and unable to get help, came up from behind Jesus and just gradually touched his garment. Now, this lady was in bad straits because in the Jewish law, someone who had an issue of blood was considered unclean. A woman during her period was considered unclean. But this lady had had a bleeding for 12 years, and so she was considered unclean. Therefore, she could not go with her family. Everything she touched was considered unclean. Everywhere she went was considered unclean. Therefore, she was essentially an outcast from her society and from her family. And she had been like this for 12 years and had spent all her money that she had trying to get help for this affliction. So this was something which had really destroyed her life. And she came up because she was not supposed to be with people. She came up quietly behind Jesus and just touched his garment. Now the disciples said, You see the multitude thronging you, and you say, Who touched you? And he looked around to see who had done this thing, but the woman, fearfully and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction. So Jesus was with this huge throng of people. Someone touched him, and he felt the touch, even though many people may have been jostling him, crowding him, pushing him a little bit, getting close to him. And the disciples sort of said to him jokingly, You want to know who touched you? Everybody's been touching you. Everybody's been trying to get a hold of you. But Jesus knew this one particular time, this touch was different. And he felt that some of what his power, his source energy, was dissipated. And he turned around and asked her. Now she confessed. She had told him the whole truth. And he said, "Your faith has made you whole. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction." Now notice that her affliction was gone almost instantly. Immediately, he says, immediately, knowing in herself, immediately that she felt her affliction, the fountain of her blood had dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed. So here's a lady who came from behind Jesus very quietly, very, very unobtrusively, and just touched Jesus' garment. And he felt something happen towards this lady. Now you can only picture, this happened while he was going towards Jairus' daughter. And Jairus was probably very anxious because his daughter was close to death. And in fact, in one of the Gospels it said that she had already died. So I would imagine that Jairus was a bit anxious by this interruption. After all, he was a rather important person in the synagogue. And here was this lowly woman taking Jesus' attention away from what he wanted done for his daughter. So he was probably a bit anxious, a bit upset, maybe a bit irritated by all of this. But this is what Jesus did. Jesus stopped doing what he was doing for Jairus and helped this lady because she had just had the courage to touch him. And because when he was still speaking to this lady, some came from the ruler of the synagogue's house who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" So the daughter had died while Jesus was on his way to see her. And of course, as soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he said to the ruler, "Do not be afraid, believe." And this was all he said. And he permitted no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. Then he came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue and saw a tumult and those who wept and wailed loudly. When he came in, he said to them, "Why make this commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." Now, here the child that Jesus was going to heal has already died. And I would imagine that Jairus would be a bit upset, a bit distraught, because he felt that if Jesus could only go and touch his daughter, she would be made well. But they were too late. But Jesus reassured him, "Don't fret, just believe." And when they came to the house, there were all these people wailing and crying and weeping over this dead child. And in those days, and people who were important or high up in the society of Jerusalem, sometimes what they did was they hired professional mourners. People would come and wail and weep at the bedside of someone who was deceased, just because it would make extra commotion and would show the people around how much this child or this person was going to be missed. So there may have been professional wailers, professional mourners here involved in the situation. So there were people wailing, and there were people weeping, and there were people making a lot of commotion. And Jesus said, "Why do you do this? Why do you weep so much? For the child is only sleeping." And they ridiculed him. And, you know, people ridicule everyone's today when they say or talk about faith being involved in healing and in life. They ridicule Jesus. And Jesus put them outside because of their ridicule. There's places in the Bible where Jesus said, "Without faith you cannot have anything." He and his disciples went into towns, and because there was no faith there, they left, feeling they could do nothing. He says, "Do not weep, but believe." So he took the father and the mother of the child and those who were with him, Peter, James, and John, and entered where the child was lying. And he took the child by the hand and said to her, "Tabitha cumi," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And immediately the girl arose and walked, for she was 12 years of age, and they were overcome with great amazement. But he commanded them strictly that no one should know it, and said that something should be given the child to eat. So the child was perfectly well again. Not only was she not dead any further, she was no longer sick either. Now there are two things in this story, these two stories of two people intermingled who were both healed by Jesus and both in different aspects. One was a rich ruler and one was a very poor, outcast lady. One came to Jesus overtly, right in front of him, and knelt down and asked him, begged him for help. The other woman, the woman, never came at all to Jesus except from behind and touched him. One person was rich and had a following. The other lady was essentially by herself. One woman had a sickness for 12 years. The other one had a child for 12 years. For 12 years he had enjoyed the life of this child. What she contributed to the household, her energy and her buoyancy and her laughter and her gaiety, all contributed to 12 years of Jairus' life, and was taken from him. The other lady had a misfortune for 12 years, and she had a bleed, and she had no sense of society. She was an outcast from society, outcast from her family, outcast from the synagogue, outcast from all her social activities. She was essentially alone because of this affliction. So there are two different aspects. One person who was rich, one was poor, one who came overtly, one came quietly. One who had 12 years of happiness before his child died, one who had 12 years of misery before her affliction was overcome. Why 12 years? Doesn't really say. But 12 years is also, in the Bible, considered the number of government perfection and the number of the church. And perhaps it's to show that the church can heal many people in different ways. This was only one of the three ways in the Bible where Jesus was shown to lift or raise people from the dead. Here was a child who was sick and who had just passed away. The other was where he raised the son of the widow of Nan, and he had been dead for a little time. And the third, of course, was Lazarus, who had been dead for 4 days. So it goes to show that there's no limit as to what God, through Jesus, can do. He helped people who are sick. He helped people who have recently died, who have been dead for 4 days. He helped people who are rich, who are poor, who come overtly to him, who come quietly to him. As long as we come to him, that's the main thing. It's not necessarily how you come, as long as you do it with honesty and in earnest and with humility. Because this lady was very timid. She came from behind and touched his garment, then did not say anything until he turned and asked her. Because Jesus knows who touches him, and he knows whom he touches. So this is the story here of these two miracles that have been put in this part of the Bible to show what Jesus did and what he can do. Nothing is too much or too small for Christ. So these two miracles are only part, and a few of the miracles which Jesus did. In the book of Matthew, it tells of other miracles which Jesus did after he returned from the other side, and before Jairus came to see him. So the miracles in Luke and in Matthew and in Mark all sort of fit together, although there's more details in some than in others. In fact, it is in Luke that we found out that the child is 12 years of age. So there's a reason for everything in the Bible. The 12 does represent the number of the church, and this is what the church is supposed to be doing, helping others and doing the work of Christ, which is what both Christ did, both for Jairus' daughter and for the widow with the affliction. So this explains these two miracles, and we'll get on to chapter 6 next week. Hopefully you'll join me for that, and I'll see you then. Bye for now.